good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at. You are watching the BAK Talk Bros, and I am the K in the BAK Talk Bros, Keas, and Gooch should be joining us here in a few minutes, and Aaron isn't feeling well, so maybe he'll join the chat, but probably gonna end up sleeping this one off, and yeah, so we're going to be talking about Chiefs and Seahawks and maybe some other stuff. Been a lot of stuff going on in Chiefs Kingdom, so we'll see what's going on there. Daryl's with us. Hey, Daryl. Good to see you, Daryl. FLDB. Frankie's with us. Yeah, man, midnight's hit me hard with kids waking up early, but we got to do what we got to do. I still actually have one or two that are awake, so anyway, yeah, hopefully Gooch gets in here. Knight's with us. Hey, Knight. Hey, good to see you as well. Good to see everybody with us, and we know we have a lot of people in Chiefs Kingdom, not just members of this channel, but in all of Chiefs Kingdom all over the world, which is awesome, and of course on this channel as well. So Sweden, Australia, Hawaii, lots of different places. So happy everybody is here, and that's one of the reasons we do this midnight, because it gives people across the globe a chance to connect at a more appropriate time for some of the rest of them, even if it's not necessarily appropriate for us. So looks like Holly's in the house as well. Our awesome moderator, the queen of moderation. Holly, you have to have a Guinness Book of World Record for moderating the most YouTube channels. But we are blessed that this is Holly's first Chiefs channel that she's moderated for, so yeah. So again, as I said, Aaron's not feeling well, so he's not going to be with us tonight. Gooch should be joining us. You guys know the drill. Gooch will probably be here sometime in the next 15 or 20 minutes. Gooch, if you're listening, this is your cue. But yeah. Anyway, so few things happened this week in Chiefs Kingdom. There's been a few hot topics out there, so we can start talking about some of that, or you guys want to chat about anything before Gooch gets in here. We can hit that as well, and I'll keep my phone here just in case he sends me a text. But yeah, where should we start at? There's a subject or two that maybe shouldn't get into unless you're okay with it, Holly. I gave it away, didn't I? Hey, Robert, good to see you. Yes, everybody stay warm. Cold in Denver. It's cold in central Kansas, and I believe it's cold in the Kansas City area. Warming up a little bit, though. It's currently 3 degrees where I'm at, so that's an improvement. But yeah, I don't know how much of an impact that'll have on the game tomorrow, but the last few days or so, with the wind chill, it's been between 35 and 40 degrees cooler in Kansas City than it has been in Seattle. So I'm not calling those Seattle guys weak, and I'm not going to say anything because the Dolphins went up to Buffalo and they were hanging right with the Bills despite that weather. So, Holly says she has no idea what I'm talking about. Yes, that's true. I'm just gonna skip on. Trying to keep a good sense of humor about things now. Yeah, it's been an interesting week. I'll say this, Holly. There's not a whole lot of... I like BJ Kissel as a person. There's not a whole lot of times that we agree on things. And today I caught up on some KCSN videos, and BJ and I are about 100% on this one. So um, yeah, it's interesting one. I didn't hide my feelings, people. If you're on Twitter and you follow me, you'll know I am Team Colquitt 100% on this. I have. For those of you who somehow don't know what we're talking about, earlier this week, well, what happened was a Chiefs reporter tweeted, I believe during the game, I believe it was during last Sunday's game, that it was time to move on from Harrison Butker. Um, and this has been a growing sentiment amongst Chiefs fans. And Dustin Colquitt, former Chiefs great, former NFL punter of 15 years, former teammate of Butker, um, had enough, and he replied to that tweet um, and said basically, "This is Tommy Townsend who keeps screwing Butker on his holds." And that kind of sent off a big to do in Chiefs Kingdom, especially when it comes to time for the pressers and everybody's getting asked about it and everyone's getting interviewed. Everyone being Andy and Dave Tobe and Butker and Tommy and all these guys. And so I'll just say this: and I have nothing personal against any of these players, but I'm really disappointed in Tommy Townsend. Uh, if it were to come out that Colquitt was 100% lying, I would still be disappointed in Tommy because of his tweet. Um, and uh, and so there was just a lot of implications in Tommy's tweet when he said something to the effect of, as Coach Reed always says, don't listen to outside voices. They're not in the building. They don't know what they're talking about. Well, Dustin Colquitt was an NFL punter and holder for 15 years. So he kind of knows what he's talking about, right? We're not talking about a former NFL quarterback dissecting Mahomes on a play where he thinks he knows what the play is, but he's not 100% sure, right? We're talking about holding for field goals and extra points. So it's not like Colquitt doesn't know what he's talking about in this case. So, yeah, I mean, it was just kind of disappointing for me to see that particular tweet because basically what Tommy did was put all the blame on all the misses onto Butker, and he didn't take any responsibility for his own role in it. And so things have came out since then, but yeah, I've now watched two separate videos since that time where Colquitt has explained the issue with holding, and it basically boils down to this, and it's kind of backed up by what Butker himself has said earlier this week. So, from what he said, it basically boils down to this: when the long snapper snaps the ball, as a holder, you're to be watching the rotation. You want to catch the ball, have it in your hand, hopefully with the laces facing the right direction. But if it's not facing the right direction, when you catch it, before you place the ball on the ground, you need to spin it into position as much as possible so that when you actually set it down, you're doing your final slight adjustment with your left hand. Because the spinning of the ball, once the ball is on the ground, is both a distraction and messes up the kicker. And so that's kind of the thing, and it kind of gels with some of Butker's comments of, whether the ball is spinning and he's distracted by the laces, or if the laces aren't perfect, or all these different things, he feels like he should be able to still get it in, except for he's still injured. But what that tells me is he's used to trying to correct for bad holding. That's what I heard him say when he made that comment. So anyway, this is Puntergate 2022. At the end of the day, Dave Tobe came out and said, yeah, there's some issues going on. We're aware of them. We don't need Dustin Colquitt to tell us. By the way, according to Colquitt, when he was there in 2020, he knew he was going to be going out, and he was basically there to teach Tommy, some of the more finer points of things, including holding, and Tommy wasn't receptive to him then, according to Colquitt, which again is kind of disturbing. But you guys listen to all the information out there. You can take it however you want. I'm just giving you my take on it, because I believe Colquitt. His former teammates believe him. So, I have no reason to doubt what he says. So, but yeah, it's kind of disturbing all the way around. And for me, I guess the best part of the whole thing is, if there's another miss in the future, people aren't just going to be, well, maybe some of them will, but hopefully enough fans have been educated through this whole experience so that if there's a miss on a field goal or a PAT, they're not just automatically jumping down Butker's throat. They're going to start taking closer looks at the holds and scrutinizing those holds closer than what they have been. So if you're watching a field goal or a PAT, be watching to see if the ball's getting rotated while it's caught and before it's placed down, or if it's getting rotated after it's getting placed down, because that's one of the big issues that Colquitt pointed out. And so, that's kind of my thing. If they've known this has been an issue for this long, why hasn't it gotten fixed? Which seems to kind of be a theme of some of the things that irritated us the most so far with this coaching staff. It's like, if you know that there are issues, why is it taking so long to fix them? So, if anything, maybe this kind of held everybody in that room accountable for fixing things. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway. So, anyway, that was Puntergate 2022. So, Knight says it's 4 degrees here in Cincy. Yeah, it's cold everywhere. It's warmer than it was last night, though. So, I mean, I guess we all have that. Yeah, Holly says wind chills here of -20. Fun. Yeah, I don't know what it is here. I haven't checked. But yeah, I forget what it was last night, but it was not fun at all. Let's see. Knight says Butker has changed his approach and has some mind issues he's got to work out. Yeah, I mean, that could be some of it. I don't think you can dispute the physical aspects that we've been talking about as well, but I think there's certainly probably some of that, and some of it's probably a confidence thing. And to that point, that's something else that Colquitt mentioned in his interview with former Chiefs Jeff Allen and Mike DeVito about that. It's part of a holder's responsibility, and maybe you wouldn't say the word responsibility, but kind of the whole part of the holder's responsibility, and I guess part of being a good teammate is kind of working through some of the psychological things. And one of the examples Colquitt gave was, so you notice, the kicker is either pushing or pulling or whatever, just a little bit. And so, maybe you readjust on your hold to account for that. It's kind of like the inverse of what Butker has to do if Tommy, when he's healthy, right? We know he's not healthy. That ankle isn't going to be right until the off season. We all know that. We knew that, from the beginning of the year. Maybe kicking that 60-yarder convinced some of us that he's healthier than what he is. But yeah, I mean, physically, mentally knowing he's injured, having to alter his approach there, being mentally more aware of that than being able to go into his routine and being more automatic, sure. To me, I think that injury kind of made it harder for him to make some of those adjustments on some of the holds that weren't perfect. But yeah. Hey, Daryl. Thank you, Daryl. Merry Christmas to you and to everyone else as well. Thanks, Daryl. Hope you are doing well. Maybe you're going to get some ice fishing done this week. I don't know if you do that, but I know you're a big fisherman there. So if you do, be safe and stay warm and all that. So Knight says, and Tommy is also voted to the Pro Bowl games. Yeah, I mean, that's nice and all, but one, Pro Bowl doesn't mean anything. I'm sorry, guys. Has nothing to do with Tommy, has nothing to do with Orlando Brown. It doesn't. All pro is what matters. Pro Bowl doesn't matter. It doesn't. It's fun for us as fans, but it's not. It doesn't mean anything as far as a player's talent. Really, I mean, it just doesn't. So, but yeah, he was also AFC Player of the Month, I believe, or AFC Special Teams Player of the Month, I think. And Holly can correct me in the chat there, but yeah, I mean, again, that was one of the things that Colquitt said. He said, Tommy Townsend's an exceptional punter. He's got some work to do on his holding. So very complimentary of Tommy as a punter, and very complimentary of Dave Tobe as a special teams coach. And in that interview, I learned some things I didn't know. Apparently Dave Tobe started out as a strength and conditioning coach, I believe it was, and then from strength and conditioning, he became like a defensive line coach, or maybe I have that. Yeah, I don't think I have it backwards. I think he went from strength and conditioning coach to defensive line coach, and then somehow became special teams coach. But anyway, I'm going to stop here for a second because Gooch is actually with us. Gooch is in the house.
I am in the building.
You saved us from a Colquitt Townsend monologue, I guess.
How is everybody?
A little bit of drama this week in Chiefs Kingdom in multiple areas, Gooch.
Are we talking about Tommy, or are we talking about Kalen, or it's Colin.
Colin, yeah.
Colin, not Kalen.
Colin, not Kalen, yes. Yeah, what we got Puntergate, we have Colin, we have Chiefsaholic. We got lots of good stuff this week.
Man,
in Chiefs Kingdom.
That's the third Chiefs superfan that's like, there's another one that's like on a terrorist watch list. And then X-rated getting into the fight with the other guy at the dadgum. I tell you what, our super fans are not like anyone else's. When we go hard, we go all out. Although, look, I don't condone crime by no means. As someone who didn't always walk on the right side of the line and paid my dues for it, got my consequences for it. I don't condone crime. However, you kind of have to appreciate the fact that he was willing to rob a bank in Texas to go to, or wherever in Texas to go to a Texans game or a Chiefs game in Texas. You kind of got to respect it.
Yeah, I think it was Oklahoma, but yeah,
I thought he was caught. Oh yeah, I guess it was Bixby, Oklahoma, or whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
You're right. Well, you got to respect it. It takes some serious cojones. But
Yeah.
whatever. Where are we at? What were we talking about? What did I miss?
Well, I had hit on Tommy and Dustin, and I was just going through the chat. So yeah,
I
if you
think. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say if you got something you want to talk about, if you have something you want to say on that, go ahead and do that, and we'll keep going
Yeah.
there.
I think I'm not going to put the blame solely on Tommy. I'm also not going to put the blame solely on Butker. One thing that shout out Pat McAfee show, but the one thing that he consistently calls out is it's a process, like it's a team effort. You know what I'm saying? It's not one person. If something goes wrong, something's wrong in the whole process, not just, one person or another, because that thing should be seamless. I think Bucker's problem is still his left ankle. And I think he's trying to power through. I think with the NFL, no fun league, but I really think it's initially what everybody says, it's not for long. Just as easily as Butker came in, if that kid we had, was it White? You knew it, Keys. The kid that set
Right,
the record
right.
before.
Matthew,
Um,
right?
right. If he was successful, now all of a sudden he's a cheaper option than Butker. It's a business, so you have to weigh those options. And he might have said he was okay, and because a lot of us do that, not just alpha males, you know what I'm saying, or alpha athletes. It's a lot of us hurt, but we say we're okay and we power through even if we're not. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Because there's always in the NFL only 32 jobs, and there's always somebody striving to take yours. But also Tommy too. If Tommy now Dustin is, I understand, or I just found out that Butker is his kid, one of his kids' godfathers or whatever.
Yeah.
So that could be. I mean, that could play a part in how he was approaching it or tweeting it. But also too, you have to understand, Dustin's been doing that for 15 years, and he did it for Butker. So if anybody's eyes, even Pat McAfee, you know, a little bit of, even a slight lean at the end is going to cause the kick to go one way or another. So if that's the case, I mean, it could be just that Townsend's got the yips. If you look at Butker's career field goal percentage and extra point percentage before this year, he was only second to Justin Tucker, who might be the second best kicker of all time outside of Adam Vinatieri, or maybe the best kicker, whoever. I mean, that's based on your preference, of course.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, and then, of course, too, and the reason why I say it's threefold, Tommy could be doing it because Winchester isn't snapping like he used to. Winchester's been with this team a long time. At least I think so. Like, I for some reason, I keep remembering his name from back a few years. But if his snaps don't have the same zip on them, if they're rotating slightly, if Winchester's playing through something and he's putting a little more pressure on the ball, so the spiral that's back to Tommy, or what should be a non-spinning ball, is now having some sort of spin, and Tommy's trying to do all that in a split second. I mean, it's, what is it? Less than 3 seconds from snap to kick. You know what I'm saying? I think it's something that they need to look at, and I think the reason why Tobe was a little upset and was like, "We're not taking advice from Dustin," is because he's being called out on it now by several vets, not just Dustin. You know what I'm saying? Your kicking game is off, and it could cost you in the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, and that's part of the reason that Colquitt gave in his defense of why he said it now. He's like, you basically have three, at this stretch of the season, it's just a few games and they're all pretty much, easier ones. He's like, I don't want this to cost us in the playoffs. So everything, and I've watched multiple interviews with him now, but everything he said, it's like the point of frustration, like he was being patient and patient and patient. And it's like at some point, we're at this point in the season now where there's 3 games left, 4 games left. And it's like, they're not fixing anything. And now you have local media and more fans saying Butker's got to go. And he's watching it and he's like, what the hell? This is what's going on. They're not fixing anything. And he basically said, something that I suggested on Twitter the other day, and maybe even in the Discord, like, I like it because if it's true, now they're forced to actually address the issue. And this is what he said. They're forced to address this issue now. They can't keep ignoring it. They can't move on. They have to sit down, and all of them, all 4 of them, Butker, Winchester, Townsend, and Tobe, all 4 of them have to get it together. And to me, that's ultimately, we can argue about who's at fault or whatever, all we want. But I'm still going to appeal to Dustin Colquitt, over the other 2 guys. Butker's never going to say anything, right? He might say something to Colquitt, as you pointed out, he's godfather to Colquitt's, I think, his youngest son. He might, let out some frustration to Colquitt, but he's not doing it publicly. And instead he put all the pressure, all the blame on himself, by saying, no matter what the conditions are, when I'm kicking, no matter what the spin is, if there's lean, if the laces are facing me, I feel like I should be able to kick it straight into the goalpost. And as someone else said, commented to that interview, it's like, you think you can defy physics? Like, you can't defy physics. You can't kick the ball, laces in and defy physics and kick it straight. It just doesn't happen. But his whole mindset, and I think it's a great mindset. And now, I think we're going off into life instead of just football here. But you have to understand what you can control, and as far as things are outside of your control, you focus on what part of that you possibly can control, in your preparation to it, in your interaction with it. And so as much as possible, it sounded like as much as possible, he's been trying to overcorrect for some of the mistakes that have happened. And this is where I think the injury, has kind of made that harder for him, to where he can't overcorrect the way he was before, physically and mentally, because mentally now, he's having to be more aware of how he approaches things with his injury and focusing on that aspect of it. So I just think it's a lot. But, again, whatever they need to figure it out. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. Not who's right, not who's wrong, but that they get it figured out. And at the very least, Colquitt saying this, take some of that hate off of Butker, and people are going to be paying more attention to where the pressure's on all of them to fix it. And I think that's what all of us want. We just want it fixed. We want made field goals,
The problem here it is. Bucker's never going to come. Bucker's never going to blame Townsend or Winchester. Bucker's a team guy. Bucker is paid to put the ball in between the goalposts. And if he says it's someone else's fault, even if it isn't or is, it looks like he's trying to shove blame. And technically, Bucker would be the leader of that special teams unit as the guy who is required to put points on the board. You know what I'm saying? So Dustin pointing it out, I think people are going to be looking, but you'll never hear Butker say thank you or finally or whatever.
Right.
Because he's getting, in his mind, I'm getting paid millions of dollars to put this ball between 10 yards. You know what I'm saying? And that's it. And it's nobody's fault it's nobody's fault but his own if it doesn't go through. I don't know where the yips are, honestly. Like I said, Bucker has the ankle. I'm sure he's not 100%. Tommy might not be able to spin the ball. Tommy might have an injury. You know what I'm saying? Winchester might have an arm thing that's throwing him off. Like, we don't know, and the Chiefs don't put nicks and bruises on an injury report. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's the kicking game. It's a major aspect of it. You know, I think they'll get it figured out. I just think Bucker rushed back, and I think he was close to being 100%. That kid kicked that record field goal, and all of a sudden Bucker was back the next week. And I don't think he was fully ready to go. And I don't think he's going to be ready until after the postseason when he's able to rest the leg for a little while and not put no pressure on it. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, you're fine. And one of the things I said earlier is I think that, because when Butker came back, he broke that record, right? So I think it kind of gave everybody kind of this false illusion that he is 100%. At least from the time he made that kick. But
I want to respond to something real quick. I'm sorry. FLDB says they should practice bad snaps on purpose so Tommy can practice getting the placement right on bad snaps. And that's actually kind of a good idea. One of the not good idea, but one of the things that actually kind of comes back to maybe coaching styles are different. Patrick said in an interview, like the no-look flick to Jerick McKinnon that got a touchdown and all that stuff. Reed actually has them practice that so that he's comfortable when the play breaks down. Obviously, it's who he is, improvisational and all that. But Patrick said Andy lets them do that, puts them in those kind of positions. So when he does those flicks and we're like, oh, man, that's amazing. How did he do that? They did it 15 times in practice. And they do it because he said that when the play breaks down, he actually goes into panic mode. So when he's in panic mode, like he's just trying to get the ball out. He's trying to find something. So Andy puts him in that mode in practice so that they know that it's repetitious. So even though it looks like, oh, he whipped it out of his hat to us, for him, it's just try number 30. Right. You know what I'm saying? And maybe that's what needs to happen with the punting team. Or I'm not punting team, I'm sorry, kicking team. You know what I'm saying? Snaps you have to bring down with one hand. Snaps you have to like reach out to grab and get back real fast. All that kind of stuff. Maybe that would help. I just thought it was interesting that he said that, and I just wanted to comment on it. Sorry, guys.
Right. Yeah. I guess the one thing I would say about that is you wouldn't want Winchester to be the one practicing those bad snaps because then he's developing bad muscle memory, and you definitely don't want that from Winchester. But yeah, I mean, totally have someone else out there doing it, right? It shouldn't be that hard to get. I know Travis is the backup long snapper, but maybe there's a third guy out there who can do good enough that he can then do bad enough, if that makes sense. But yeah, I don't think you want Winchester practicing bad snaps because then you start messing with muscle memory. But yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea at all. And Gooch, listen, I'm going to say one more thing and then I'm done with this whole thing. I don't know how much you've watched and how much you've listened to and all that, Gooch, but I think the biggest thing that was disturbing in all of that, though, was Colquitt said, he essentially said he knew he was out the door in 2020, right? They brought in Jake Fox in 2019, and and that almost happened. Colquitt knew he was out the door. From how he said it, he was there in 2020 to help Tommy. Well, he very explicitly said it. He said Tommy was, as a UDFA, Tommy was like the most sought after UDFA. So Tommy wasn't going to go somewhere that he had to compete for a spot. That's what Colquitt said, right? So the implications there were that when the Chiefs signed him, he knew that he was the star. He was the punter. Dustin knew he was the punter, which means that Dustin knew he was on his way out, but Dustin was still on that roster. And what he said is that he tried to help Tommy with the snaps back then. And that Tommy was completely dismissive of the instructions and help that he tried to give him. And so I think that's one of the things, to me, that's the most disturbing, is this has been a 3-year issue, apparently, and he was dismissive of any help that a 15-year veteran, well, at that time, 13-year veteran punter was trying to give him. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm personally done talking about this one. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say about that, Gooch. Otherwise, we can move on. It's an interesting night. Says Nick Lowry had the same problem in his career in Kansas City. He missed a few and took the blame and found out later part of it was the holder changing how he did his job. That's an interesting one. Yeah. FLDB says here in Minnesota right now it's -6 with a wind chill of -27. Yeah, it's ugly in Minnesota. My in-laws live in the Twin Cities, and there's a reason we don't live close to them, and a lot of it has to do with weather. So, pretty sick. But you guys are used to it up in Minnesota. We're not really out here anyway, in central Kansas, not used to all this sick stuff. So. Daryl says his phone says it's 7 and feels like -7. My watch says it's 3. I don't know what the perceived temperature is without asking it. So. Holly says it's multifaceted for sure. I'm not saying Tommy is perfect and admit he has had bad holds. My issue is more with the way Colquitt went about it. That's all I'll say. Knight said, and he may still be feeling a tinge or even some pain and could be the biggest of all issues. Yeah, one of the things I think it was Mike DeVito said, it was either him or Jeff Allen, because Jeff Allen, Mike DeVito, and Dustin Colquitt did this interview on KCSN. One of them said something, I think it was one of them, said something like, from the first day of training camp on, nobody's at 100%. Nobody's at 100%. From that time forward, nobody's at 100%. But for sure, I don't think that ankle is even close, which would be, at least one nice reason to get the number 1 seed so he can have a week to set and it can get a little bit closer. Is that what it was? AFC Special Teams Player of the Week? Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was week or the month, but yeah, had some great punts there. Gooch Knight says, good to see you and Merry Christmas. Who was the first one? I'm missing something here, Holly. Who was the first one? What? All right, I might be missing some conversation here, guys. The real KB is with us. Good to see you. How is the weather in the Des Moines area? That's right, Holly. It's an operation all needs to mesh among long snapper, holder, and kicker. Daryl says he's rooting for Cincy this week to beat Buffalo. I think all of us are. There's a path where Cincy beats Buffalo. I want to say Buffalo can go ahead and win their other two games. And as long as Kansas City wins out, if Cincy beats Buffalo, we have the number 1 seed, I believe. Cincy and Buffalo can both go 2-1. If we go 3-0, we have the number 1 seed. I believe is how it plays out. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. So, yeah, it's kind of that disgusting position of having to root for Cincinnati when those two teams play. But yeah, I'm with Holly there. It's a game where I don't want either team to win. Well, I do if it impacts the number 1 seed, but yeah, like in my heart, I don't want either team to win. But intellectually, if it's an advantage to the Chiefs, then yes, we gotta root for one team over the other. But we can root for it to be an ugly, hard-fought, draining, physically demanding, hard-hitting win. So, yeah, if it ended in a tie, the problem is it still counts as half a win for Buffalo's record. So they would still have to have either a second tie or a loss in there as well for Kansas City to get the number 1 seed. So Holly says Winchester is 33 and has been with the Chiefs since 2015. Yeah, and he was, I believe the story was, they were talking about the story of Winchester on the team because he was in training camp. I think Jeff Allen said his rookie year or the same time he was in, he was a rookie, something like that. Anyway, I believe the story that Jeff was saying was, so Winchester actually came to Chiefs training camp or did a tryout as a receiver and then ended up coming back as a long snapper. So I don't know if there was college long snapping experience or what, but certainly means that he's probably one of the most athletic long snappers in the NFL right now. So Frankie says the Bengals need to win that one. Daryl wants them to tie. Holly wants everyone to speak the tie into existence. Knight says we want a 3-3 tie. Real KB says that would be perfect. Daryl says we need to win out. Knight says, yeah, the hot takes of people not in the know. Who's that, Knight? Let us know who that is. Right, Holly. And Butker probably says that quite a bit. I know I've had my moments. Knight says, Tobe needs to get them all together, break it down in the film room, and then fix what's wrong. I mean, that's kind of the frustrating thing, right? Like, Tobe said what he said, but it's like, where's it been, right? If the process is right, the results or the product will eventually be right, right? Luck can be a factor in there. Different things can play a variable in the results, but if the process is right, you should be getting good results. If the product or the results aren't what they should be, then you have to go back and you have to look at your process and be critical of that process and maybe fine tune that process. Again, another, kind of a life lesson that transcends football thing. Yeah, Holly says, exactly. I don't care what it takes. Let's just fix it. Right. I mean, that's the biggest thing. We don't want it to end up costing the team, in the playoffs. Because the thing is everything, when you get in the playoffs, everything becomes heightened, right? Little things become more important. The details become more important. Mistakes become more important. Like, all of these things become more important. So get it fixed, get it figured out now, because listen, missing 4 points in a game, on a extra point and field goal, not going to cut it. Right? And I think in some aspect it makes it even more frustrating that Andy would play the end of the fourth quarter for that field goal. It's like at some point we have to. And when you have Mahomes, you could make the argument you should probably be doing it that way anyway. You should be playing for the touchdown, right? The field goal is what you settle for. It's I guess your kind of your safety net, if you want to look at it that way. But you should be playing for the touchdown, and it never felt like it that drive, or at least that set of downs, that they were playing for the touchdown. It felt like they were playing, especially on third down, they were settling for the field goal there. And so, I think that's frustrating. When you have Mahomes, you should be playing it differently, in my opinion, anyway. But if all this is going on, then I think that definitely influences how you play it. FLDB says they should practice bad snaps on purpose. All right, so this is Gooch, the comment that Gooch read earlier. We talked about that. We're in agreement. I just don't want Winchester to be the one to practice those bad snaps. You don't want to create that muscle memory. So have somebody else do it. But I think it's an awesome idea. Knight says, but this whole thing is being blown out of proportion because as fans we're used to seeing it done right, and now it's not right. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and we all are fans in different ways. 2, we all have a lot of different things going on in our lives. Some people, we all watch sports, we all interact with sports in different ways and for different reasons. And this can become one of those ways where we fight for control in a really weird way. And some of us are guilty of doing that with sports. I was for a long time. And so, at the end of the day, people just want results. And if the results aren't there and the results continue to not be there, people are looking for any way they can to control it. And that's where you get the, cut Butker comments or, fire Dave Tobe comments. And it's like all people really care about is seeing it done right, seeing the right results, right? The expected results, the wanted results. And so at the end of the day, that's all we really care about, and so if we feel like they know that the results are bad and they're not doing anything to fix the process, that's kind of frustrating. And so we don't have any control over that. What we do have control over is how, we blurt out something or what we say. Like cut Harrison Butker and bring in a new guy. Holly says, Tobe isn't a dummy. He seems to be a straight shooter, and I can't see him letting a problem persist without correcting it. I mean, I guess the thing is that leaves us with one or two options, right? Either that statement is true and Dustin Colquitt is a liar, or that statement isn't true. So, I mean, one of the two have to be true. Like,
I don't know about that.
Did I say some magic words?
I don't know. There's actually two sides of that argument. I actually agree with Holly. I don't believe he's a dummy, but I also believe that he might be stuck a little bit in how he used to do things and maybe not have evolved. Keep in mind, Tobe had, Hester and Tyreek. I mean, generational guys that kind of made coaching, the blocking and the setup and everything else kind of almost moot to the point because those guys were going to outrun, or those two guys, Tyreek and Hester, and they weren't going to need much setup anyway because by the time they got the block set up, they were already at the third level and headed towards the end zone. And sometimes, I mean, you can just, and coaches do it all the time. You can just not rest on your laurels to say, but because something was successful for, different periods, you might still think it's successful when it's not. I mean, I do have to give them credit. They have taken more touchbacks and fair catches and stuff in the last few games. You know him, Tobe is like the Bruce Arians of special teams, no risk it, no biscuit. So, I mean, yeah, there's my argument. That's not even an argument. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess if you want to say he's being stubborn with his process, or,
Isn't that all our coaches?
Gooch said it, not me. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to say maybe there's some stubbornness with the process, or, I mean, the thing is, you can't say he's not a dummy and then say the process, he doesn't know what the process should be, because then that would go back to that. So, I mean, you could make the argument if you're being stubborn about something, you're a dummy, but I guess I'm going to go to the opposite side here, and go back to something Colquitt said that I found interesting, because it does come into this topic, because one of the things he said was, Tobe is a great strategizer, I guess. And two, one of the things that he specifically mentioned is that, from the time he started working with Tobe, one of the things that like caught his eye or impressed him or whatever, that he took the time to specifically mention, is that Tobe has them, like, everything is repetition. Like, he was talking about punt returners doing like 100 returns, like, in a day. Like repetition, repetition, repetition. So if that's true, and this was Colquitt praising Tobe, and he praised Tobe a lot. He praised Townsend a lot. He admitted, his own imperfections as a player. But if there's all this repetition and the product still isn't good, we have to go back and ask the questions about the process. So, I would say this, and I'm going to leave it at this. How many punt returns did Sky Moore muff? After the first one, Tobe came out and said, we identified the issue, we're working on it, it's going to be corrected. And then he muffs the second one. Tobe basically says the same thing. He's back out there, he muffs the third one. Like, something has to give, right? We get these answers of, we know what the issues are, we're working on it. But in every single one of these issues, we never see the problem corrected. I'm going to leave it at that because I'm not going to go farther in making accusations. I'm just going to point out that fact. In every one of these special teams areas, this is what we've gotten. And have we gotten to that point yet where we have seen the problems corrected, whatever it is? For me, the answer is no, unless you want to count taking Sky Moore out and replacing him with someone else. Hasn't corrected Sky Moore's ability to return a punt, but it corrected our muff issue. So Knight said it was an ankle sprain, but now wondering if it was a high ankle sprain, which we know doesn't heal in weeks and can affect an athlete for months, or maybe a pinched nerve in the foot or ankle. Yeah, I mean, and there, we will never know, and we never know half of the stuff that players are going through. Just because, the team doctor, gives them their medicine, and they play through a lot of things. So it's like when it gets to a point when players aren't playing, it's kind of getting serious, unless that player is like really soft. But I mean, I think at some point there would have to be some mental aspect to it as well. Even once he gets to 100%, you don't know that yet. You got to get to the point where you rely on your body again, right? You psychologically get over what happened and trust your body to keep your ankle stable and keep your body upright. FLDB said, have Colin Saunders do the snaps. Hey, I'm for anything that gets him on the field. I prefer him in at fullback, whether he's blocking or taking the carry on end short and goal line situations. But that's me, Gooch. I don't know about you. Give him the ball. Let him do a backflip into the end zone. That's what I want to see.
That would be amazing. I want to bring up something real quick because we're not talking about, but I have never, I'm going to preface this with, I kind of like Nick Wright. Sometimes I think he's too much of the Kool-Aid snorter for my liking at times. I realize he's a Chiefs fan. He can be a little overboard with the optimism, but he said something today that really kind of stuck with me, and it made sense, which is rare for hot take artists to say something for me that makes a lot of sense, and I'm not like, well, that's hyperbole or that's kind of far-fetched. But in these games, these last few games that the Chiefs have won, should have won, but it's been really close. One, the Texans are feisty. That's true, but he said it's almost as if Andy is coaching to not have injured players going into the playoffs. And he pointed out numerous times in the Broncos game and the Texans game where in big moments, not huge moments, but in big moments, Kelsey wasn't on the field. Like almost like limiting snaps and limiting the chances of getting injured, because if you go full bore, you probably will get injured. But it seems like Andy's coaching to not have people get injured and doing just enough to win, to get in the playoffs and go full bore. And I was like, I started when he said it early this morning, and I've been in classes and working, but I've been rewatching the games. Thank you, NFL Network. But it actually makes a lot of sense because there were some big third downs and stuff like that, even in the beginning of games where Kelsey wasn't on the field, Juju wasn't on the field. You know what I'm saying? It was really kind of just odd. And then the games were close, and he was like, maybe they're closer than they expected. Like the Texans game, you don't have those two fumbles, one by Juju, one by Pacheco, and game's probably a little further out in points than 3 in overtime. Not to mention the field goal and stuff like that. Just take out the field goal and stuff. No fumbles. You've got to assume the Chiefs score at least 3, if not 7. Now you've got a 10-point game. I mean, it's just interesting stuff. And what's your take on that? Maybe Andy coaching to not get injured, not blow people out, so his guys don't have to go full steam until they get to the playoffs. When, as of now, the games really matter. The Chiefs could go 0-3 and they'll be the 3 seed. Like they're locked in somewhere between 1 and 3. You know, so you could pretty much, I don't want to say coast because that sounds like they're not trying to win, but you can go easy and try to save your guys for the playoffs because you know you're guaranteed a home playoff game, at least one, and you're not going to get any lower than the 3 seed.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, because you do have a decision to make, right? You're playing your starters every single game if you want the 1 seed. You're not getting it without doing that. You have no chance, right? So
no, I get that, but I mean, maybe this team needs to go on the road because they're losing at home. I mean, right. And I'm not, obviously, I would love the 5th installment of the Arrowhead Invitational. Home playoff games are good for Kansas City, you know what I'm saying, everything like that. There's no home field advantage like Kansas City. But again, going back to maybe 2 years ago, maybe we got spoiled with that, and we need the kind of galvanizing, gotta go on the road. Nobody believes really in this team outside of Mahomes to get the job done. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I wouldn't mind going to Buffalo. It's just like Kansas City, more snow, but it's still cold.
Right.
And it's not like we haven't played in that before. I just thought it was interesting. You're right. You'd have to play your starters all 3 games, and they'd have to go hard all 3 games for you to even have a chance at the 1 seed. The problem is let's say, God forbid, we lose to Seattle. Cincinnati beats the Bills. Because Cincinnati beat us, they're the 1 seed with the same record. And then it doesn't even matter. Because then if we win out after that and Cincinnati wins out, which they could, and Buffalo, even if they lost to Cincy and they won out, and we all end up with the same record, Bengals are 1, Bills are 2, we're 3. Facing the Chargers.
Yeah, or whoever would actually. Yeah, I mean, a lot of things can happen in the next 3 games, but well, I guess my counter to if that's what they're trying to do My counter to that would be, if that's the case, why the rush to bring Tony back and have him activated for this game? I think this game would tell us a lot. Personally, this particular game would tell us a lot. And to me, that's already started with the fact that they rushed Tony back. I'm not all right. I don't know they rushed him back, but to me, there's no reason for you to bring him back for this game, right? You can be a little bit more patient with bringing him back. That's why I say rush back. But the other thing is, if this were the case, then I think you see Ronald Jones starting this game. It's going to be cold as hell in Kansas City.
Yeah, it is.
If you're concerned about your players being injured, this would seem to be a game where you're going to give the ball to Ronald Jones instead of McKinnon, who already has multiple ACL injuries, or Pacheco, who college season isn't quite as long as an NFL season, so he's starting to feel the wear and tear. So to me, that would kind of be telling. You don't want your receivers to be taking hits. I would wonder, after Mahomes got punched in the helmet against the Texans, if that was the case. Would you play Mahomes the whole game? Would you slow play that fourth quarter with Butker, knowing he's not at 100%, and seem to be settling for a field goal instead of really trying to get that touchdown?
That's a multifaceted question right there.
So yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna jump in. I think they brought Tony back, and they only gave him 10 snaps. I actually think that was because McCole was more injured than they thought. I actually believe McCole was supposed to come back first, and then they were going to start ramping Tony up for the playoffs this game or the next game when we play Denver or whoever we play after the Seahawks. But with McCole being hurt worse, they can't take the chance. They've got to get one of those weapons back on the field because, look, I love the weapons we got, but the one thing I said about MVS is I didn't trust his hands because I watched him before he had his season with no drops, and he was dropping easy passes. And I was really worried that he was going back to that, and Pat doesn't really trust him. And Juju isn't the Juju with Antonio Brown. He's basically Travis Kelce light. Plays in the same area of the field, really good with the ball in his hands. But we don't really have, without McCole, and I know MVS was supposed to be that guy, we don't really have that stretch the field threat. We have it because of MVS's speed, but MVS is really just like he's got one route, go. You know what I'm saying? With a couple of breakoffs in that. And people aren't scared of that. And then I think Andy, for being as sweet of a guy as he is, he plays for the field goal because he doesn't want to, I don't think he wants to embarrass people. He doesn't, I don't think he has that bone unless he gets disrespected. And he hasn't been. My opinion, I would probably, the smart play says to run as much clock as you can, kick the field goal as time expires, go home with the win. I've heard people say a dub's a dub. Not all dubs are created equally, in my opinion. I think the way we've been playing and the way we've been coaching and the way we've had these little mistakes, which oddly enough, believe it or not, and real Chiefs fans are going to understand what I say when I say this. This is the first time, usually the most consistent unit on our team is the kicking team. I mean, Bucker was 88, 90% before this year. So he wasn't trash. And we've always had issues with like Mahomes and his footwork and throwing interceptions, or, the defense and making business decisions and this, that, and the other. It's just the year. Just the year we're having, but nobody's scared of us anymore. And it's not Tyreek. It's just not scared. And we haven't blown anybody's doors off to make them scared. Like every year in the playoffs, if you think about it, every year since Mahomes has been the starting quarterback, everybody said the same thing. You don't want to face this Chiefs team in the playoffs. Nobody's saying that this year. Oh, they're saying the offense is great and efficient and Mahomes is better than he's ever been, but you don't hear threatening. You know what I'm saying? And I think there's no fear because we're not blowing people out because we haven't shown that we have the propensity to do it. Propensity, that's good college work. Somebody give that to your kids tonight. I'm sorry. I just went off. I was just answering because I think my main take from that was I think Tony came back maybe early because McCole was more hurt than they knew. I think McCole was also, I'll be fine, but he can't put weight on. That's the biggest thing. Every time they talk about McCole, it's like he can't gain his playing weight back. So I don't know if it's the flu, if he had an appendectomy and nobody's talking about it, you know what I'm saying, or something like that, because it's minor enough that that's outpatient surgery. You go in, do a cut, blah, 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 get it out. But I think that they had to bring Tony back to try and have that speed, unpredictability aspect to the offense to start implementing more of their offense again, so that when we go into the playoffs, we are more than just Travis finding space, catching a pass, 10 yards. Juju finding space, catching a pass, 11 yards. Isaiah Pacheco, 7 yards up the right-hand side. That's just my idea. I don't know.
Right. I guess just like to me though, if the idea is they're playing to not have injuries and, they're playing with the understanding, worst case scenario, you're the third seed and they're conceding with that at all. To me, it doesn't make sense to rush Tony back. You don't need the speed guy if you're not 100%, I guess my phraseology here, not 100% committed to winning a particular game because your focus is more on staying healthy. And, if you're fine with falling back as far as the 3 seed, I guess is what I was getting at, because you have enough receivers. And this is another game where we're going up against a team that is one of the bottom 2 teams run defense in the NFL. So should we expect 80% pass, 75% pass again? I don't know. Holly brings up an interesting point here. She said, that just got me to thinking. Butker said they do drills with bad holds with weird angles and lace positions. Maybe that's messing with Tommy's muscle memory. Yeah, I mean, it could be. It would make sense. To me, the muscle memory. And I'm not saying I'm right on the muscle memory thing, but for me, I would think you want great muscle memory. I don't see it being the same as Mahomes practicing off-platform throws. Gooch might say, well, that's why his footwork is getting screwed up, and that could be right, and that could be a very fair point. But yeah, I don't know. I guess again, I know we all don't care as long as they get it figured out. Some of us would be interested to learn what they ended up doing to fix it, but at the end of the day, all we really care about is the results there, so that the product in the playoffs is as good as it can be, because you have to have it. The margin of error is way too small when you get to the playoffs. Coaches are better, defenses are better, quarterbacks are better. FLDB says, on to the Seahawks. Do you think, Gooch, do you think our defense is... Oh, how do you think our defense is going to do against Geno? Have we seen a final injury report? Do we know? No Lockett's out, but Fant was questionable or something. I haven't seen anything since, so I'm not sure.
Lockett's out, the safety's out, and somebody else, but they haven't ruled out the running back. They haven't ruled out Fant. And man, that's a loaded question, because it's a loaded question. I don't like it. I think Geno being in the MVP discussion at the beginning of the year was awesome for Geno, but I think he's kind of regressed back to the Geno we know. The problem is outside of McDuffie, our defensive secondary they haven't been lights out, but the lights have definitely been on when they get into the red zone. I think they'll be all right. McDuffie doesn't get targeted very much, so he's already basically become our shutdown corner. I think it could be an interesting game, and they're playing for their playoff lives, and the Chiefs aren't. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. I think the 10-point dogs that they are, according to Vegas, I don't think it gets that high. Now, of course, I could be wrong, and Mahomes comes out and goes 36 for 41 again for 300 and some yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and the defense steps up. But the one thing I always say is be careful when you're dealing with a wounded animal or a cornered animal. And it would be a big, not saying Pete Carroll is as petty as me, but how amazing would it be for him if they got into the playoffs the first year without Russ, and Russ is sitting at home? And, I'm just saying, I think it's going to be close. I won't give a score because I don't like doing that, but I think it's going to be close.
Yeah. This is a game that I think from even before preseason, I had as a kind of a surprise loss. There earlier in the season, it definitely looked like it was trending in that way. And it very well could still end up that way. On paper, you think of how it should be easier because you don't have Lockett now, so you don't have to worry about defending him. It's hard because that your number one job is to stop DK Metcalf. Your number two job, if he's healthy and he's playing, is going to be to stop Kenneth Walker. And so, can they do that? Are they going to continue to take steps to improve? How are they going to play DK? So, how do I think our defense is going to do? I wish I could say great. Seattle has 2 good offensive tackles, and they're both rookies. That said, I think it was Brett Coleman came out this week and talked about Charles Cross, the left tackle, I believe, had a tell that came up last week when Bosa, got the best of them in that matchup. But are we going to be able to take advantage of something like that? Probably not, in my opinion. So, and one of the things about Jones is there was a tweet. I don't think I shared it with the RGR Discord, but just talking about Jones is somewhere around 800 snaps this season, which is more than he's had in any other season. He's not getting any younger, and there's still 3 games left. So, this is hard. This is hard for this defense. It's hard for Jones going out there, have the most snaps he's ever had, and the talent around the rest of the defensive line just isn't there. And I'm not saying there's not promise and there's not some players who flash or are better than we expected them to be. But there's not high, even above average talent surrounding Chris Jones. So while it looks like it should be easier, and even more so if Noah Fant is out, you don't have to worry about his speed at tight end. I don't know if that's the case, if he's out or not. I just saw he was questionable last I checked. On paper, you look at it and you see, okay, DK Metcalf, double him, right? Or are we going to let Marquise Goodwin, who's really fast, who are we going to put on him? Like, who's going to be the guy who beats us when we shouldn't be able to get beaten? I guess for me, I'm not 100% confident on it from that side. Holly says, to be honest, I haven't followed the Seahawks much this season, so not sure what, if anything, we should be worried about. Again, I mean, they have great offensive tackles. Geno was at one point in the MVP discussion. Certainly playing better than even Russ played last year. Lockett and DK, were formidable. Kenneth Walker and some of their other running backs were doing good, and the defense was doing good. This defense, I actually think that they might try to play Mahomes similarly to the way they played Russ, in the way that they rushed for and spied, mirror spied Russ. I think they might try to do the same thing with Mahomes, where they're going to bring the pass rush probably from Orlando's side, or maybe they try to bring it from Wiley's side. Maybe they try Orlando's side first, and then if they can't, they try Wiley's side. Bring the rush from the one side, have the spy, ready on the other side. I think the other move that we talked about when we were before we played the Broncos that the Seahawks did against Russ was called I think it's called police, where you have the edge defender as the spy. So it looks like you're rushing 4, but you're really only rushing 3, and quarterback's not finding someone home, and he takes off running, and all of a sudden you find out that edge defender was a spy the whole time. Now, Mahomes is, I forget who it was that said, Mahomes is always, he's not fast, but he's always just a little bit quicker than the defender. That's usually true. But, to me, this is kind of, I see them using some of these similar things. They play, I think it was the second or third most amount of cover 6. So we're seeing it again. Denver was doing it a lot. I want to say San Francisco was doing it a lot. The Bengals kind of copied, things that San Francisco has been doing all season. So we're getting a good deal of exposure to it, which should ultimately help us in the playoffs. because it's one of the last things that defenses have to slow down our offense. Basically, nothing else has worked, and they just kind of have to cycle through everything and just, try to keep Mahomes and the offense on their toes. So, if they cycle through all of this stuff and make Pat have to hold on to the ball a little bit longer, maybe that's problematic. Just our defensive wise, like, it seems like it should be super easy on paper, right? Last week, when the Texans only had 3 receivers and they had 5 tight ends, and they were on like their 3rd string running back, that seemed like it should be easy. Some of those offensive plays, they were having Jeff Driscoll lined up as a wide receiver or tight end. The other quarterback. It's like, so I don't want to say anything's easy. I think they know what they need to do. Can they do it? I'm not sure they can. I actually think this is going to be a pretty close game, but I'll be happy to be wrong. As I said, this was one I thought before the season even began was going to be an upset. So I will be thrilled to be wrong on that one. Knight says if someone other than CJ can get, or besides CJ can get to Geno inside, we should be fine. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting in that Danny Shelton is active for this game. Brandon Williams has looked good so far. The 2 games he's played in, the limited snaps he's got. We're gonna get to see Brandon Williams and Danny Shelton hopefully inside together to slow down the Seahawks run game. That should be fun. Anything they throw out there that adds to the pass rush, is only going to be a benefit for us. So, FLDB says, going to be hard with the whole D-line room being sick. Yeah, that's a good point too. And then you throw in the cold weather, on top of being sick. Holly says, except I have Geno on one of my fantasy teams, but that's about it. Oh, and that the Seahawks have an awesome Australian punter. Knight says, FLDB, well, true, doesn't change the fact Geno likes to sit in the pocket till the last second before he commits to running it. Yeah, and I mean, if they're bracketing DK all game, maybe that matters. The Seahawks do not blitz very often. They have, I think, the lowest percentage of blitzing in the NFL, and they're not particularly good at it. But they still do a decent job, if I'm recalling this correctly. They still do a decent job when they're not blitzing. And I think part of that is, because of how much cover 6 they're playing and some of these little fun things they do. So again, for me, this is going to be good preparation in some ways for a rematch with the Bengals. Oh, okay, Holly. So, she was asking she asked who the first one was. Chiefsaholic is the third. Gooch, you would have to answer that one. Who was the first super fan to get in trouble?
Oh man, I can't think. His name was Helmet Head, something like that. But he's on the terrorist watch list from 9/11.
Okay.
Not saying he did anything or anything like that, but he's on the watch list. So, Helmet Man, thank you, Helmet Man. Yeah. super Chiefs fan terrorist watch list. There we go.
All right. Knight says drops both teams back a half a game if they tie. Yeah, I mean, the problem is, though, we want Buffalo to drop a whole game back. So, you know, if we're wanting the first seed, it doesn't really help us there without Buffalo at least tying or losing another game on top of that. This is probably their best chance to lose out of their remaining 3. I want to say, though, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, New England plays all 3, Buffalo, Cincinnati, and the Jets. Is that correct? Their last 3 games? Kind of a brutal schedule for New England. I think that's what it was. Maybe it's Miami. Buffalo, Cincinnati, Miami. Something brutal like that. But if New England could find a way to have some offense, they could blow the playoff picture up. Real KB says it's -3 in Des Moines. Feels like -27. Real KB, when you're spending time with family, don't forget you can sneak into the Discord on the football watch party and peek in there, since Des Moines gets what is it, Vikings game? Something. It's not the Chiefs, I know that. I remember that. Holly says, okay, so if Cincy means we get number 1 seed, I guess I'll root for them. Yeah, at least for, we'd still have to win out, but if they beat Buffalo, at least, at that point we control our own destiny as far as getting the number 1 seed. But, Gooch almost has me thinking maybe we're better off not having the 1 seed, even though that week off, again, I guess if you were in that scenario, you would just think, okay, let's take off week 18 against the Raiders. And maybe that's a good idea anyway, because the Raiders are going to be out to injure our players. At least I think so. What do you think, Gooch? No matter what, I think the Raiders are going to be out. I mean, hell, the Texans aren't even in our division, and they were out to hurt our players. Knight says, we just plunged to -3 here, wind chill of -12. Yeah, I haven't even looked here. We're still at 3. I think our low is 1. But, wind isn't that bad. We're probably somehow at a pretty close wind chill, though. So, Winchester is a great blocker. Madden lists him as a tight end, which is weird, but I'm sure he's gained a little weight from his wide receiver days. I still think it's a crazy story. Cool story, but a crazy story. FLDB asks, thoughts on YouTube TV winning the Sunday ticket bid. So I haven't did all the reading on this one yet. I'm trying to remember what my wife told me. Yes, I listened to her. I don't always remember everything. It sounded like they were, what did she say? It's going to be offered standalone. Is that right? To the base package? Like, to me, that's kind of key to how I perceive it. Do you have to have the base package, YouTube TV's base package, in order to get it? One, because that obviously makes it more expensive, but 2, as a YouTube TV subscriber, there's the possibility that increase in base package purchasers increases the price. So, but listen, there wasn't much that could be done other than letting DirecTV keep it. That would be a loss. Like, that was the worst thing in the world, in my opinion, as far as it was concerned. So getting it away from DirecTV, no matter which other place has it now, is good, in my opinion. I might be a little bitter towards DirecTV back in the day when they eventually told me that I couldn't no longer get it on my PS3. Oh, talking about fans want to get rid of Butker. Night Hunter says McKinnon saw to it in overtime that we didn't have to try the field goal, and I'm very happy for that. It's sad because it's going to take a while before we start trusting field goals and extra points again. We took it for granted. And we, even as not even Chiefs fans, NFL fans, kind of take it for granted when, Justin Tucker kicks as well. Like, those two guys are just so automatic, that you take it for granted. You take the snaps for granted. You take the holders for granted. You take the kicks for granted. So, Daryl, I don't even want to put your comment about he who shall not be named up, but I do acknowledge seeing it. I think Night Hunter agrees. Mike in Sweden is with us. Gooch. Mike says, "Good morning, Merry Christmas." Mike, is it Christmas morning where you're at now? It is Chiefsmas morning. That's going to be weird, waking up in 7 or 8 hours once we're done here, and knowing there's a noon game on a Saturday. Be weird because my wife will be at work, and usually we get to watch the games together, so that'll be different. But Mike, glad that you're with us today. Mike, here in the U.S., we're all getting these nasty Arctic winds or whatever that have it really cold. So I don't know what it's like there in Sweden. Let us know, Mike. Are you nice and warm? Because we could all come visit, Mike. Gooch, can you get the private jet and we can do a live from Sweden if the weather's nice?
Swedish girls are hot.
Wasn't a question, but go on.
Mike, I just had to come to you, brother. I don't care if we're tired or not.
Yeah. Gooch says no matter what the weather is, it's hot in Sweden. All right, we are about 40 minutes behind here. Mike says, evolve is the key word. All coaches need to understand their personnel and adapt their plan to put them in the best situation to succeed based on their individual abilities. Goes for all of them. Yeah, and I don't want to get into a Bill Belichick praise party, but that's certainly something that he does a lot better, in my opinion, than a lot of other coaches. Is he sees a player, we see players, and we, even in college, we see their weaknesses and everything. He's really great about seeing their strengths and figuring out, hey, I can use them in this role, and really putting all the pieces of the puzzle together in that way. Yeah, Mike adds from Andy on down the coaching tree. Sure, Holly, I forget what I said. I should have just said strategery. Holly says, I think sports psychologists must have an extremely interesting career. Man, the whole mental thing, like in the past, I don't think it's as big of a thing now as it was in the past, because it's like mental rehab in a way. Like whereas now, like the last 10 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, a lot of athletes are more proactive, and it's more like training. Like, they're more proactive in mental training. Like there was a book called, I think it was called Mind Gym, that was on like the whole mental aspect, of sports. Going back to baseball, I remember Alex Rodriguez talking about different mental things. You hear Tom Brady talking about all these different mental things, Michael Jordan. And so I think the game has really evolved where even the younger players now are more mentally fit, if that phrase makes sense, than in the past. To where I, I don't think sports psychology is as much reactive now as it's proactive on the front end, in like a in like a proactive kind of training aspect. Instead of reacting to bad things happen, we're making athletes mentally strong at the beginning to kind of stop that from happening on the end, if I'm making sense, at 1:45 a.m. That's Holly brings up an interesting point. She says she's seen Sky Moore practice punt returns numerous times in pregame practice, training camp, and during the preseason, and never muffed, but in a game situation seems to freeze. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's interesting. I think going back to your sports psychology thing, once it starts happening, it's in the back of your head. I want to say, I don't remember if it was Pat McAfee or someone else. I think it was the second muff punt. Somebody pointed out, I think, that Sky just took his eyes off the ball and looked down at the coverage coming at him. So maybe it's a contact fear. Maybe because Sky's not a big guy. Maybe it's that. In practice, you shouldn't be really worried about your 11 teammates on punt coverage coming down and hitting you, but maybe they do practice it that way. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing here with that. But, I go back to the New Heights podcast and Travis talking about Kadarius Toney returning punts once he got to the Chiefs, and how much better he was compared to the other guys we had in the room. Well, the other guys we had in the room were who? Sky Moore and McCole Hardman, I believe, right? So, but he was just talking about how the other guys were like constantly running and trying to spot the ball in the air, and they're running, whereas Toney would look up casually and he would just be stepping, backwards or forwards, wasn't really in a hurry, and just like calmly, reading where the ball was and just calmly walking there. To where the implication was he's much better at reading the ball off the foot of the punter, and he's there early enough that he's prepared and he's calm to return the kick. So, I don't know. That's what Travis was saying, because, Travis made a point to say how much different Toney looked returning punts, and how he hadn't witnessed it before. So I don't know if that really sheds anything on there or not. But
keep in mind that out of McCole, Toney, and Sky, Toney is the only one who did it in college. Like, McCole didn't even become a receiver until a year before he joined the Chiefs. And
Right.
Sky never had to return punts in college. So, I mean, it would make sense that Tony was a little more comfortable and more prepared.
Right. And maybe that's one of those areas where Tobe is too much like, someone playing Madden, where, and going back to what Colquitt said, Tobe is really good about identifying certain traits, of seeing things in people that nobody else see in them, right? Identifying these things earlier. We got Butker off of Carolina's practice squad because Dave Tobe recognized something in him. He was right. He recognized something in Tommy. He was right. If you're right a lot of the times, sometimes it's harder to not trust yourself when you're not right. If you think you're seeing some traits that make McColl or Sky a great punt returner, that to the point that you're ignoring some of these other things, and again, I'm not trying to throw Tobe under the bus. It's kind of all conjecture at this point, just kind of informed conjecture, I guess you could say. Knight says, yeah, they never tell us half the issues. They just say they are injured and that's it. And part of the time they don't even tell us that. I think if a guy can get a shot or take a pill, half the time they're probably not showing up on the injury report, even though they have injuries that they're seeing the team doctor to take care of. Knight says, still want to see Saunders do a backflip into the end zone and catch a pass for a touchdown or 2-point conversion. You want to see the flip first, then the throw, and then the catch, right? That's what you're saying there? That would be pretty cool as well. Knight, I think talking about the Texans here, feisty, they were downright mugging the Chiefs. Probably not a great term to use, since all of us are still dealing with the whole Chiefsaholic thing. Knight, do better. Mahomes gets slammed to the ground, no call, and then gets punched, no call. Yeah. I think we already talked about the refs last week on the post game there, but it's pretty ridiculous. It's also ridiculous, someone that I respect a lot in Chiefs Kingdom, but argument we had a couple months ago where he insisted, and I get it, Chiefs Kingdom is sensitive on some things, and it certainly can feel like the league is out to get us at times, but he insisted that not only do the Chiefs not get unfavorable calls from the refs, but that Mahomes actually gets protected more than basically saying that Mahomes gets the Brady treatment. Which is because he's a superstar, which is so utterly wrong. Like, are you really watching the games? If you think Mahomes is getting the Brady treatment, are you watching the games? Because he's not. He's not getting anywhere close to the Brady treatment. He takes all kinds of shots. He takes all kinds of hits that if Brady took them, there's a flag out. He gets hit. People do stuff to him that if Chris Jones does it to the opposing quarterback, there's a flag. He rarely gets the benefit of a flag for being the best quarterback in the NFL. He does not get the Brady treatment. And we went back and forth on this, and it's just like, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Like, I'm wrong a lot too, but this is not an area where I am wrong on. Patrick Mahomes gets abused. He does not get a Brady treatment. Yeah, Mike points out, yeah, Carl Cheffers is a known Chiefs hater. Yeah, there's some history there with Cheffers, and hopefully we don't have to face him or Cleet Blakeman or John Hussey in the playoffs. And yes, saying the word face is partially intentional. But anyway, um, Holly says, I personally want another Arrowhead Invitational for the AFC Championship game to have an opportunity to attend in person again with a different outcome. Yeah, Gooch might have talked me into being okay with an away game. Gooch, you tell me what you think, but here is something that popped in my head when you were talking about this. You know, and we talked Gooch back on the Roguehead huddle when we had Jason Dunn on. One of the things you asked him about was, you know, the crowd noise at Arrowhead, and you know how it affected the offense at times. I'm kind of wondering how it affects our defense, right? Because we have all these young guys, we have all these rookies, and the defense has to be able to communicate. Can they hear each other? Are they able to communicate? Is it harder for them to communicate when the crowd noise is loud because the opposing offense is on the field, right? Our intentions are to make life harder on the opposing quarterback, the opposing offense, but are we, at the same time, are we not also making it harder on a young defense to properly communicate with each other and hear each other? I don't know. Just a thought there. If so, you know, then it might be advantageous to us to play on the road. We've did okay playing at home, though, so. All right. Holly asks a question for us, Gooch. She says, who would you want us to face in the first playoff game? Gooch might not be awake anymore, or I might have to say some.
Nope, I'm here.
He wasn't going to let me say anything about Bama. He jumped right in here.
My ideal opponent would have to have the 1 seed in the bye. So that way we'd end up with either Miami I'd really rather see Miami or the Ravens or somebody like that. And I'd like for the Bengals and Bills to beat each other up. Well, actually, you know what? What is it? Let's see. If I had my choice, I'd rather see the Jaguars or the Ravens. That's who I'd want to see first.
Man, this is a hard question.
That's why it took me a minute to get unmuted, because I was like, oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because, I mean, the Jags have been trending up since we played them, so a rematch would be harder. A lot of these are going to be rematches, which makes them harder. I would think you certainly don't want to face the Chargers a third time. It's really hard to beat the same team 3 times in the span of, what, 3 months? 4 months? 5 months? I guess we played them week 2. Whatever it is, 5-6 months in the same season. That's really hard to do. And those games are always really difficult, you know, games. I could be on board with the Ravens. I think I get where you're coming from there. Miami's kind of dropping off a little bit, but I would still be concerned about Waddle and Tyreek. Um, man, I think I would probably stick with the Ravens, although part of me would be fine with facing either the Bengals or Bills, and you're just kind of like, well, at least if we lose this game, we're not going through a heartache of losing an AFC Championship game. I don't know. I'm gonna go with the Ravens. So.
Okay, I get that. Here's my main reason why I chose the Jags, and I get that the Jags are trending upwards or whatever. The thing here it is. Here's sure things in the NFL. Andy Reid after a bye. Andy Reid's offense is being potent, and Andy versus his proteges. They usually don't beat the boss. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't. Generally, when Andy's understudies, even though they're great coaches, unlike Bill Belichick's coaching tree outside of Mike Vrabel, you generally don't beat Andy. They don't beat Belichick. Andy's coaches are great, and they still don't really beat Andy. I would rather see them, and I think it'd be twofold. Like, I really think that would help, like, obviously for Jaguars fans, if we have any that happen to be watching us, welcome for one. But two, I think it would be a good measuring stick for Lawrence, who quietly has become a really good quarterback. Just my opinion. I just don't think they're ready. And I think it would be an easier game than, I guess you'd have to take into account, like, really, you're saying the Ravens, but that really just depends. Is Lamar playing? Because I think our defense is too young to handle a Lamar that's trying to get paid.
Well, I guess I'm coming at this from the perspective that Lamar was my fantasy quarterback, and after like the first 3 weeks where he got me about 40 points a game, he started to screw me over. So, and so I was watching various games because he was my fantasy quarterback, and I'm not as, he doesn't look as good this season, even before injuries, and maybe it's the offense as a whole. To where, all things out there, I'm just not as concerned. And maybe I should be, because they have, Andrews, when he's healthy, is a great tight end. Looks like he's likely going to be a good tight end. And our middle of field defense hasn't looked great so far. So, maybe. But, to me, right now, I think with the upwards trajectory, man, and I think when you add in, once again, the Ravens with the injuries they've had, I think that they would be the easier out. I don't know. I'm not going to die on the hill. Knight says DK needs someone to be physical with him at the line, otherwise he's going to eat you alive. I've been saying that for how many receivers? We just don't do it. Knight says that Marquise Goodwin, Noah Fant, and Kenneth Walker all listed as questionable for the game. Yeah, that's the last I'd seen. I didn't know if there was any update because it's been a couple of days. So Holly says, not going to lie, actually glad I sold my tickets to this game several months ago. Is that because of the weather, Holly? Yeah, she says that. I just needed to read down. Because of the weather. Kudos to those who brave the cold. Knight says it's going to be frigid. -15 wind chill. Mike says, welcome to the frozen tundra of Arrowhead. Mike says the weather, Gooch in Sweden, is negative 6 degrees Celsius. So low 20s Fahrenheit for those of us who don't know how to do the conversion to from Celsius to Fahrenheit. I just asked my watch, so it's made me lazy. That's not too bad, Mike. Is that the temperature, or is there like a wind chill lower that at all, or is that the wind chill? But yeah, that's something I kind of wondered, Holly. How many Seahawk fans are going to show up for this game? And, to what extent will it actually affect the players? But how many Seahawk fans are going to show up to this game? Because I've been monitoring the last 3 or 4 days. It's been 35 to 40 degrees colder in Kansas City with the wind chill than it's been in Seattle. Tomorrow, well, I guess technically today now, it's supposed to be 52 and raining in Seattle. So a huge difference in Kansas City. Mike says, yes, and windy, so it feels a lot colder. That answered my question there. Yeah, all right. And Mike says, New England plays Cincinnati, Miami, and Buffalo. That's what I was thinking there. I think I said the second time. It's a crazy difficult ending to the schedule, but it certainly puts them in position to screw up the playoff picture, which I am 100% for. Knight says, Cincy has Pats, Buffalo, and Ravens to finish the season. Yeah, I wish the Ravens were playing how Gooch thinks they would play us, or, expects that they would play us. Like, every time I root for the Ravens to beat one of these other teams, like the Bengals, they let me down. Holly says, yeah, the Texans play dirty, so did the Jags and Rams. Everyone wants to hurt us. Yeah, physically. And, like, they're not even in our division. It doesn't make sense. They're not even in our division. Some of these teams, like, they don't even have anything, like, realistically to play for, so it doesn't make sense. So how much more do you think the Raiders are going to be out to hurt us? So, to me, that's a big question for what you do on Week 18. Knight says, Bills have Bears, Bengals, and Pats left. On paper, that's outside of the Bengals. That's on paper, it should be at least 2 wins there. But doesn't always happen that way. But it probably will, because I'll be rooting for them to lose each game, so that's what happens. Knight says, yeah, Tucker had a bad game last week. Yeah, it definitely happens. So, but these guys are, guys who've typically been the most automatic ones in NFL history, and Tucker and Butker. So, all right. So it is Christmas Eve there. He says Sweden celebrates on Christmas Eve. Holly says she appreciates Belichick a lot more since Brady left. Yeah, I would agree with that, simply because I don't think he has the quarterback to be able to beat you as easily now. So, yeah, looks like Knight is out. Knight, I missed you by about 20 minutes here, trying to get through the chat a little bit faster here. But, it looks like I did get caught up. But, yeah. I don't know if you guys have anything more to say. I think we basically covered everything we would have to say on the Seahawks game. Let me ask you this, Gooch. I don't know if we'll do a post-game show, so let me just ask you this, Gooch. What would happen in this game that would really get you angry or frustrated? Like, what's something or some things that would happen that would have you really frustrated. Um, Go ahead.
Not running the ball.
Yeah, I think that's a legit one.
You need a running game in the playoffs. It's just no way around it. You just can't. You can't become one dimensional. I realize who we have at quarterback, but the flaws, every team has flaws. Probably the two teams that are close to the perfect teams are the Niners and the Eagles. But every team in the AFC that would be in the playoffs has flaws. The Bills, Josh Allen is basically their running game, and they've only got Diggs at receiver. Now, everybody's like, well, what about Gabe Davis? He only shows up against the Chiefs. In reality, it's Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. That's it. They've got a pretty decent defense, but their offense is, outside of those two, is pretty garbage. Burrow, if you take advantage of it, Burrow's been good, but he's proven you can get to him. The Bucks kept him. It was 17-0 before Tom Brady started giving the ball away. So, I mean, their defense is obviously their weak point, even though they may have the best wide receiving group in the NFL, their defense is still suspect. The Chiefs, obviously, our tackles are a problem. Our defense is young. And as Keas stated earlier with Pacheco, their season has been over in college. And there is a real thing, such as the rookie wall, that most rookies hit once you get past game 12. The Jags are young, even though in the playoffs. The Ravens are too Lamar-centric. If Lamar's not being Lamar, they don't really have a receiving core. It's really just a running team, which during the regular season is good enough. But if you can't make defenses play honest and all they think you're going to do is run, that's too many chances to hit Lamar. The Chargers are a coin flip away with their coach. Their coach is weird. So for me, with the Chiefs, what would anger me against the Seahawks, really, because that's not the Legion of Boom, even though it's a decent defense, you need to establish the run. You need to prove to all, because this is, like you said, Keas, yourself, this is the last 3 games. You need to prove you have a running game because so defenses play you honest in the playoffs. And I do like the fact that they're making Mahomes get under center more, and it's not all shotgun. Because it used to be shotgun, play fake, or handoff, play action, but nobody believed you were going to run. You know what I'm saying? So run the ball. Don't shy away from it and keep running it. Wear them out. You've got, like you said, Ronald Jones, Pacheco, they both run hard. They have similar styles. Run them boys into that line over and over and over again. Waste them plays. Make that defense tired. They don't want to tackle big boy running backs that run downhill from the time they get the ball. So it would frustrate me if they didn't run it. Yep. That was long-winded. I'm sorry.
Well, you're fine, and I think we're in agreement there. One thing to go back to last week is, I guess, technically, we talked about how they only ran it once, on the opening drive or two, and their scripted first 15 plays. But when all 22 came out, I went back and started watching it. That first drive, they actually started out, I want to say, with 2 RPOs. So it was Pat's option to pass on the second play there, but it looked like a clear RPO, those first 2 plays, and then they had like a jet shovel pass, which, I mean, for all intents and purposes, really is a run play. It just shows up statistically as a pass on there. But, yeah, I think with the weather, again, I think this is I'm on board with this being a Ronald Jones game. He's a physical runner. Let him smash those guys. That Seahawks defense, like I said, they're last in the NFL in rush defense, or second to last, something like that. And this was even, and they just lost their nose tackle, if I recall correctly. So they shouldn't, right? Because we said similar things again about the Texans before that game. This shouldn't be an issue for us to run. I think for me, it's going to be frustrating if things that shouldn't be issues are continuing to be issues. So what about defensively, Gooch? Obviously, this isn't like the two teams we played the last couple of weeks. But defensively, what would frustrate you?
Before I get to that, I want to give some props. I realize that Colin and fans, the small majority of mouth breather, COVID breathing, idiotic, Twitter finger having Chiefs fans got into it with Colin Saunders about the D-line and their push. One, I want to say, if y'all can do better, please go out there. I would love to see you push 300-pound men who run 4.6 speed, and their only goal in life is to keep another man their same size within a 2-yard box. I'd love to see you guys try. This is not the Big 12 or the SEC or the Pac-12 or whatever, where one team that should be dominant runs roughshod over the other. These are grown-ass men who are paid millions of dollars to do one job. And I want to point out that we have more sacks at this point this year than we did all of last year. And the only change on that line is, two, Karlaftis, who plays part-time, and we traded Dunlap for Ingram. We got a really young secondary. So you have to excuse those 300-pound behemoths that you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley if there are some plays that they just can't get to the quarterback. We do have, by the way, for those of you that only look at sacks as a stat, the most batted down passes in the NFL, and it's by a lot. So that means even when they're not getting home, they're getting their hands up and knocking the passes down. What would frustrate me the most about this defense is if the secondary doesn't look like they're showing improvement outside of McDuffie and Snead. I know Reed was the big acquisition, and everybody's looking at his stats. Reed is the last line of defense unless he's in the box. So the one person that shouldn't have a lot of stats is Reed and or Thornhill. If they do, we're getting our behinds kicked because they're the ones making the touchdown saving tackles or whatever. I think the only thing that would frustrate me is if their technique, the cornerback's technique doesn't get any better and we're still giving up red zone touchdowns where it looks like we're lost. I think you even said the key is communication, where it looks like half the defense is communicating, another half is not. That would frustrate me, being what they're 11-3, so 14, 15 games into the season. I think I'm done. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think for me it's simply if we see DK Metcalf go out and have a Jerry Jeudy day, which sounds ridiculous to say, but there is no Tyler Lockett. and it's not a last minute, there was no Tyler Lockett thing, right? Jerry Jeudy did what he did with no Cortland Sutton. If DK goes out with no Tyler Lockett and has just a dominating day and we don't have any adjustments, we don't have any answer for it, I think to me that's going to be somewhat frustrating. And I guess again you have to put it in context, because if part of that is because Spags is putting people out there to give them experience, against a great receiver like DK, then yeah, okay, fine. If we're looking at this as, if we're looking at these last 3 games as kind of a last minute classroom, practice for the playoffs thing. But yeah, I mean, going back to the defensive line, again, for me, it's a both and thing. I think it's a great point to point out the batted passes. I think it's also somewhat right for fans on the opposite side to point out that a larger number of our sacks this year have come from having to blitz or longer, like, second chance sacks, which isn't necessarily a negative, right? That's one of the things that we like about Karlaftis, is that he has an unending motor. He's not giving up until the play is over. And so, I think there is positive and there is defense. And, like, I'm not going out to bash Colin Saunders. I like Saunders. I want to see each guy on that defense continue to get better. And if they got to the place that they were good enough that we didn't have to draft anybody or sign someone in free agency, like, ultimately that would be the best solution all around. We're saving money. We're saving draft capital. Chris Jones is getting the help that he needs or could use on the defensive line. And, I'll just leave it at that. But Chris Jones is a stud, and too many times, to me, he feels like the Patrick Mahomes of the defense. Right? It's like, we have Mahomes, whatever else we do on offense, and I'm not saying we don't have a lot of guys on the offense, right? Or a lot of money invested on the defense. But the reality is, it seems like at the end of the day, the offense, when push gets to shove, gets put on Pat's shoulders. At the end of the day, when push comes to shove, the defense is getting put on Chris Jones's shoulders. He's the one taking double and triple teams on a lot of these snaps. Whereas if we had guys who were better, it doesn't happen. Like, you stop. To me, having better guys on the defensive line with Chris Jones and utilizing Richard Dent's rule of 3, where, you have to have 3 good pass rushers to really make a big difference. To me, that's like having Mahomes hand the ball off. Like, I understand you don't want Mahomes to become a one-dimensional quarterback, right? If you're a defensive coordinator, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to make it so the Chiefs are paying him $500 million to hand the ball off instead of beat you with his arm. But, at the same time, you're going to die by that if that's what you want to commit to. Well, on the defensive side, offenses are just like, guess what? We'll just double or triple Chris Jones, and we're going to dare Frank Clark to beat us. We're going to dare Derek Nottie to beat us. We're going to dare Colin Saunders to beat us. We're going to, and on and on and on in one-on-ones. And far more often than it should happen, it doesn't happen. Like, it should happen way more than it does, because if it did, teams wouldn't be able to double and triple Chris Jones. And someone made a reference to, Aaron Donald and the Rams making 2 Super Bowls, winning one. Yeah, he won one. When did he win one? Last year. What did they do last year? They had Von Miller. They made a trade for Von Miller. What happened when they got Von Miller? All of a sudden, the offense couldn't do everything they wanted to and just make it about Aaron Donald. So, that's going to be my argument. It's going to continue to be my argument. And it's not a slight on the guys we have on the defensive line, because I love them and I want them to get better. But they're not there yet. And if there's no one there, and again, it's not a slight. I have really enjoyed what Carlos Dunlap has meant to this defensive line. I've loved what Karlaftis, the energy he's been able to bring. And as Gooch said, they're doing a great job at batting down passes. But at the same time, you're paying Chris Jones $30 million, and he's in the prime of his career. He's now, dare I say it, surpassed Aaron Donald as the best defensive tackle in the NFL. And he's allowed to be double and triple teamed simply because other guys cannot fairly consistently win one-on-ones. And I just went on a long tangent in response to you, Gooch, so I'm just going to stop here. I'm going to give you the last word, and then you can send us off, Gooch. Unless I don't like that last word, and then I'll chime in. While we wait, Holly, I don't think we know the answer to who all is sick on the defense.
The whole defensive line room. Actually, Chris Jones was a full participant in practice the last couple of days, and so was Dana. Well, I don't really have much to say. I appreciate all y'all that came and checked us out tonight. This is a little odd for us. We don't normally do a Friday night, Saturday morning, midnight live stream because we usually do it on Saturdays right before the game. So this was new for us. It was great. Shout out to Aaron and Liz. Hope you guys are feeling better. Liz had the 1-9, and Aaron, we believe, has the flu. So actually both diseases are floating through that house. So we want to wish them get well soon. Appreciate all you guys that came out, checked us out. Merry Christmas to those of you who are opening presents on Christmas Eve like Mike in Sweden is doing. And hopefully, nope, we won't see you because we'll do a post game on Saturday. So we will wish you all a Merry Christmas. Make sure you tell everybody you get in contact with you love them. This is the time of season. Well, you should always spread cheer, but especially nowadays. And remember that there are people who could be less fortunate than you. Check up on them. Make sure they're good. It's cold outside. Some people can only afford to warm their homes with kerosene heaters, and they don't have heat. So spread some cheer. Take some food to somebody who hasn't eaten. Tell people you love them. Enjoy the holidays, and we'll see you at the postgame.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Have a Merry Christmas. Have happy holidays. Everyone be safe and warm. Everything Gooch said. Thanks for joining us. And Aaron's not here to say it, so I have to say it. We'll be back.
You got your team, and we got a kingdom. Ready for war. We score and win. We're the Super Bowl champs, the king of the